Well, it's the video everybody's been waiting for, you know. The Royal Rumble happens. What am I going to do? Not talk about it? I think I didn't talk about it last year, though I don't remember. Maybe I did. The year before, I think I did, and I talked about War Games recently. And I relatively remember getting some engagement on that video. So you know what that means? We're back here, because we have things to say, because I actually watched a wrestling pay-per-view for the... You know, I don't do it much. Oh my god, I just reopened the tab. I got 102 views on that War Games review. You know, it's terrific. Um, but anyway, this is a run through. You know, the Royal Rumble happened. We have thoughts. Apparently, the internet has thoughts that I haven't really engaged with. I literally went to work, couldn't watch it live for the first time in a long time. Came home, watched the whole 4.5 hour shebang or however fucking long this goddamn thing was. And yeah, and now we're here to talk about it, to stream. What a time to be alive. What a busy and engaging life. I will say, I'm going to say nothing about, oh, well, maybe I'll say something about the finish of the Cody Rhodes match. I skipped the DIY match, you know, especially when I'm not watching this live. You expect me to watch matches between Rumbles like we ever care. It is funny, they have done alright the last 2 years in the... Oh, maybe I did talk about the 2024 one. Because last year it was the 4-way, and that was pretty good. That was engaging enough. Because usually these title matches on these shows die a fucking death. Especially since we've started the 2 Rumble structure. Like, it's just terrible. It's like, I do not want to watch a normal wrestling match in between these, like, meme wrestling matches that are obviously a million times better. Those being the Royal Rumble. Now. A good idea would have been to have the tag match open the show or something. But nobody cared about this tag match. I don't think anybody in the audience knew either one of these tag teams. Obviously, TNA, the greatest company of all time, circa 2010. I'm 9 years old watching the Great Motor City Machine Guns versus Beer Money in 17 different matches that year. So obviously, I love the Motor City Machine Guns of 15 years ago. But now it's like, okay, I guess they're here. Interesting. They won the belts or something else. I should point out I don't watch Raw or SmackDown or any of that shit. Not really. I watch Twitter clips usually of like CM Punk promos or something because that's the only thing I'm interested in really. I did watch the Netflix premiere though. I watched the whole thing, and maybe even live. I don't remember. But that shit was fucking boring. So, you know, we stay away from shitty Paul Levesque's WWE. We prefer the great Vince McMahon when nothing made sense and you didn't have to pay attention. Now, so that's all we've got to say about the shitty tag match that I'm sure was good. Other examples are always funny, like AJ and Daniel Bryan had, well, all of their matches were boring. Even though they seemed like dream matches on paper. And especially I remember one they had at the Rumble just being an absolute slog just waiting for the next Rumble match. I remember about Asuka and Becky had an opener that was kind of cool. And then that was the same night Becky won and she came back out. But yeah. Usually. And I think Sasha and Ronda had a great match. Oh my god, just have women wrestle. We're sick of these fucking shitty men. This is also like the 3rd or 4th year in a row, I feel like, where the women definitely went on first. They went on last the first time they did it. And maybe they've gone on last one other time. I don't really remember though. And obviously 2 years ago, the Roman Kevin Owens title match happened. It is also a funny bit that Kevin Owens is always in fucking title matches at the Rumble. Anyway, what a bunch of preamble, huh? Sergeant is in chat saying, indeed, Punk being cooking with the promos, and then has a little emote. You know, I'm supposed to know these Twitch emotes. I'm like 5 years into streaming, but I don't. This one means giggling or something. That might literally be LOLW, and I only know it by the text form. Or it could be Omegi lol. Who knows? Now, the Women's Rumble was up first, you know, the great Women's Rumble. We're coming in. This one was, well, they were both pretty interesting. The women's match obviously has less potential winners than the men's one. But you can fool yourself. You can always fool yourself when you're watching these Rumbles. And if you fooled yourself in that men's one, you might have been correct in the end. And there's no better feeling, frankly. But we'll get to that momentarily. Coming into this Women's Rumble, I feel like 2 months ago, the discourse was just like, oh, I think Io's going to win. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like Io. But then they did the Io match with Rhea on Raw, right? Or is it just against Liv and she lost? It's like, oh, is she just going to rematch? That's a little weird. Io and Rhea doesn't really seem like a too dynamic of a feud. What's going to happen there? And then slowly as we got closer, it seemed less and less emphasis was on Io. And obviously, I only like found out like 2 days ago that Charlotte was even announced for this match. I just assumed she was like going to be a surprise return, and that's what people were talking about. But she had two promos, video packages. They were both okay, coming into it. So Charlotte was definitely the favorite. There was always the possibility of Becky coming back and winning, and then it didn't feel like Bianca had a chance, even though she's a bigger star. Bayley didn't seem to have a chance, but they all could have. And then also, I think some people fooled themselves into thinking Jordynne Grace could win, which is interesting. But it ended up being Charlotte. How we get there is probably more interesting. Because also Liv, who just lost the title at that next Netflix premiere, is also in the match, and she's obviously a big star. But it's like, well, she's not going to just win the Rumble to challenge Rhea again. We've already been there, and her versus Tiffany Stratton doesn't really work. And it doesn't, I have no feeling that, especially in the Triple H era, we're switching belts at Elimination Chamber or whatever. I doubt there's any title matches even on that show. I got Rhea, Becky, or Charlotte, and lo and behold, well, aren't you just the smartest, Sergeant? Maybe this is before Rhea had won the belt. Though she did literally win last year, right? No, who won last year? Because she was champion, actually. It was also the year before that she won. It was because she versed Charlotte. Bayley won last year, right? It is funny that I'm almost certain both Rumble, like, winners are going to go after, like, the like, fake world title belt. The less important one. That's kind of funny, especially when John Cena is almost certainly getting the Cody match, and he's going to be the runner-up in the Rumble, but the one that actually main events WrestleMania. Just how funny. Io and they did this in the women's match where they started strong. Well, there's certain types of Rumbles you can do, right? You can have Rumbles where like two guys that aren't going to win start, or girls that aren't going to win start, and then you go to 5, and then somebody big comes in and throws out the first 4, and then they do a little dominant period, and then the ring slowly fills up, etc., etc. Or you can just start strong and just have the ring stay full the whole match. They did the latter for the women's match. B-Fab is the first one eliminated, and she lasts for 7 minutes, which is fucking crazy. It's funny that Carmelo Hayes or whatever, which is like a guy that everybody's supposed to like from NXT, was the first one out in the men's match. That's funny. But yes, both. I don't know. The story of this Rumble is that it was like a really good, until like the end. Which wasn't terrible, but it just fell flat in a lot of ways because there were some things that clearly weren't factored into the booking. Like, it's tempting to just blame it on the Nia Jax stuff, but I actually liked that stuff, and they're committing to it. It just came at the expense of a few things. Anyway, we'll go through it slowly. Because Io comes out and she gets a very good reaction, and I'm always watching the Io reactions because sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. The same thing with Liv. Liv really doesn't get too much of a reaction at all. Not like she gets some boos, but not many if she's not with Dominic. Which doesn't really. WWE really, like Michael Cole will say it on commentary all the time, Liv Morgan was the superstar of the year in 2024. I feel like I would like that to be true because I like Liv Morgan, but I feel like it's not true and that she really isn't that big of a star outside of the Dominic stuff. I think she's very clearly his second in a sense, even though Raquel is her second, making her the third. I think Liv was probably still her hottest in terms of, not in terms of attractiveness, chat, you disgusting men, but in terms of hot periods. Around the Ronda stuff, right? When she won Money in the Bank and around then when she was feuding with Becky as sort of like the underdog. Now, obviously, she's a heel. She's effective enough at it. I think she is just outshone by Don. Don. And I think it hurts her, because when she comes out, she doesn't get too big a reaction. But everybody does know her. There's some people that just get zero reaction because you don't know the song. Raquel Rodriguez was actually one of those later, but that's just because she usually comes out to Liv's song, I'm assuming. Like when B-Fab comes out, nobody reacts, right? And there's certain ones that do get reactions just because, like Maxine Dupree gets a massive reaction compared to certain other people. It is funny who didn't get reactions here, and obviously the biggest reaction of the night was for Alexa Bliss's return, which is like crazy to me. I don't mean to be a hater or nothing, but it's like, For Alexa Bliss, really? Do people care this much about her? The answer seems to be yes. But that's kind of crazy. Um, Alexa Bliss's character, like career trajectory, is like insane. Where she was like clearly like the fifth. Not she wasn't the fifth horsewoman of NXT, but she was clearly like the fifth featured girl there. But she was completely overshadowed by the other four, and then they left, and she never got a takeover match. Because Nia came in, and then Asuka came in, and even Emma in that period got a takeover match. And before she knew it, she was just on the main roster. And then she was given the belt very quickly on the main roster, and then she just became like second to Charlotte, the biggest star out of all of them. Like Bayley was doing nothing, Becky was absolutely doing nothing, and Sasha was always stop-start, and she lost to Alexa Bliss a lot. And obviously Charlotte was always positioned on top because Vince liked her, which I assume he really liked Alexa Bliss too. And a lot of the like Kuma appeal, because there's always like Kuma girls that are very popular, and part of their popularity is very much that they are like the sexiest girl on the roster or whatever. That very much was Alexa Bliss from like 2017 to 18. All the weird accounts would always post pictures of her, whereas now it's like Tiffany Stratton, which her sexiness is very much a part of her popularity. Liv Morgan to somewhat of an extent, but she's kind of like the crazy girl aesthetic. Mariah May in AEW is very much that too. And I think that probably does factor into it. Another thing that dawned on me is that it literally might be nostalgia for like 2017, which is insane to me. Not just because 2017 is obviously a terrible time in WWE like history, but also it's like that was like 2 years ago, bro. Why are you nostalgic for it? It's like crazy on a bunch of other faults. Also, obviously, she's been gone for a long time, and she came back with music that was vaguely recognizable. It's not her original theme, but you hear the original theme in it, and you recognize her. Also, it was a surprise and stuff, whereas Charlotte wasn't. Because if you compare her to Charlotte's like return, it is like, oof, the Charlotte girl really. She needs to be like an obnoxious heel for anybody to care. Though she does almost have legacy like Roman appeal, where it's like, well, you kind of have to like think she's important just because she's been positioned that way for so long, and eventually maybe it'll stick. It's very funny. 5 Feet of Fury, that was an Alexa Bliss thingy. I always thought Alexa Bliss was like good, but she was like limited to being good because she was such a caricature of like a mean girl. And it was like, because there's like, especially back then, to even have a promo that wasn't horribly cringe in the women's division was like a big thing. Like, Sasha Banks is like my favorite wrestler, but my goodness, those promos were terrible, and I hear in AEW still are terrible. Becky Lynch, I've always thought was a very cringe promo, even when she like caught fire a lot. Ronda Rousey was an absolutely terrible promo. She didn't understand timing at all in wrestling, and she would talk too quick and never give the audience time to like pause and respond. Charlotte was especially in the Vince era, maybe the worst promos I've ever heard in my life. Just over the top, like, oh, I just hated everything. Bayley was terrible in both. When she was being happy-go-lucky, it was corny. When she was trying to be evil, it was kind of cringy. Like, I can't even think of a good example. And Alexa Bliss was just like an over-the-top mean person. And like, it was obviously very inhuman and not like an interesting, it was like a very one-note character, but she like got a pass because it was somewhat plausible. And I do think that is probably why Vince liked her a lot. It's crazy like that. Now we've got like Rhea's promos are a little iffy too. I think Liv's are pretty good. Bianca's are really good. So we've grown a little bit there, huh? Tiffany Stratton is probably pretty good too. Anyway. What was I doing that? Oh, like the funny reaction to Alexa Bliss. I like it. Like, it's a cool moment. It's like it is like a wow, like I've arrived moment where it's like that's crazy for her, and like she probably will be positioned much better because she wasn't positioned very well in this match. She went out before the end at like number 28. Who threw her out? Liv Morgan. Yeah, to just get a heat moment. It was clever that they had a heel get rid of her because. They probably lucked into that. I don't think they thought that through too much because I honestly thought they didn't think she would get that big of a reaction. The two biggest pops of the match were her and Jordynne Grace, which is great. Jordynne Grace looked very good in this match. I have not seen much of her because I have not been watching the TNA periods she has been in. But everything she did looked good. She's like a powerhouse. Her picking up Piper was great. All great spots. I'm trying to start at the start, but I'm just jumping ahead to all the talking points. Charlotte is, I think, better as a heel than a face. I feel like she's more tolerable as a face because it's slightly toned down. I did like the 2 promos she has cut, in, like the video package promos. I think it might have been a Vince McMahonism. I think there is a possibility that Charlotte could be much better in this new sort of environment. I assume she will be the babyface in by technicality, because I assume she's challenging Tiffany Stratton. They could just do Rhea again, because that match was pretty good last time. A lot of people think it was really good. I just think it was pretty good, you know? I'm edgy like that. Because Rhea really doesn't have an opponent. Like, the only thing is, like, maybe Io would win the Chamber, and Io and Rhea is like, oh, it'll probably be a good match. I don't think there's much of a story. And it's hard to have much of a story going in with Io because of the language difficulties. Like, the closest you could get was the Bayley match, and that wasn't, like, the hottest feud ever. And, like, Dakota had to do a lot of the talking for that. Is Dakota Kai injured, by the way? I kept, like, doing... Because, you know, when you get to the, like, there's, like, 5 people left in the Rumble, you start doing the math, and I was like, okay, Charlotte, Nia, Dakota Kai, and one other person. But then it turned out to be Julia and Nikki Bella. And there was no Dakota Kai. Is she hurt again? Maybe she is. No, didn't she have a match for, like, that IC belt or something? I feel like I saw them advertising that on the Netflix show. So maybe she isn't, which is weird. Is Kairi Sane injured? I think Asuka is out, right? Io was the only person in. I will say, talking about how that Io-Bayley feud wasn't hot, they did do, like, a stare-down moment where the crowd did react a little bit. So maybe not. Maybe that did have some staying power. They tried to do it with Naomi and Jordan Grace, which I think they did do last year and did get a reaction. This year they got no reaction. It was interesting. It is funny, like, what a WWE audience will and won't recognize. There were a few moments where they tried to have stare downs and it didn't work. And that's one of the cringiest things of all time. Like, oh, you feel so bad for them in the moment. There was another one in the women's and I think one in the men's. There were also stare downs they particularly didn't do in the men's, which was kind of irritating. Now, the big one, which is the Punk and Cena one, I think they are saving just for later. But the other Cena ones didn't happen. It was weird. Like, he didn't have a moment with AJ at all. They just started punching each other. He didn't have a moment with Seth at all. I feel like these were good callbacks that could have happened. But they didn't. Anyway, Io comes out and she's like the babyface of the whole match. And it works because every time... Now, the crowd was very good at near eliminations of reacting. And this sort of plays into my general talking point about how much dumber WWE audience have generally gotten. But I think they're almost willingly dumber because they just want to react more. Because obviously when somebody gets thrown over, like in previous Rumbles, it's not like everybody is like, oh my god, are they going to survive? It's like, yes, he's going to get back in. It was like a smarter audience. Like, to get them, you're going to have to do a little bit more. Especially in that like golden like late 2010s period where the crowds were all very smarky. But every time Io would even tease going out, even at like the very beginning, like the crowd would go, oh! And it probably is important that she was the first person they saw all night. But this, and also her and Liv go, look, an hour and 6 minutes and an hour and 7 minutes, like crazy lengths. And then they just get like knocked out in a big Nia thingy that kind of didn't come off, I think, how they expected. And it's a big letdown. Like, the Io elimination should have been like a big moment. Like, obviously she should have been, I think, in retrospect, in the last 2 at least. Because number 3 is Roxanne Perez. And I have no idea why she was there at the end. Like, apparently she has like an NXT title match with Bayley or something. And Julia, I think. Like, coming up. Like, obviously this girl has been, like, on the verge of coming up for, like, 3 years. So probably either she might be on the WrestleMania card and by then already be on the main roster, or maybe it'll be afterwards. Maybe her and Bayley will have a match at WrestleMania or something. But, like, why did it necessitate her being, like, number 29? Because especially then you know she's not winning. This was a problem in this match. It comes down to the final 3, and it's Nia Jax, Roxanne Perez, and Charlotte. And it's like, well, Charlotte's winning. At least if, like, Io... or even Liv to an extent, or especially if it was like Bianca or something, you'd be like, oh, maybe like she could win or something. But when it's like an NXT girl and Charlotte. I think I convinced myself that the NXT girl had to be winning because you wouldn't make it so obvious this way. But alas, it was just another Charlotte win. So whatever. I'm fine with Charlotte winning. I think her and the Tiffany Stratton storyline will probably be like, oh, Tiffany Stratton doesn't belong on the top. I'm going to show everyone what it's really like, and she probably will win. And then in like a year, Tiffany Stratton will get the win back and something. It'll be a big long thing because everything has to be a year-long storyline in the Triple H era, which is usually good. The Triple H era is obviously much better in every conceivable way. There is moments in the men's Royal Rumble which is like incredibly like this might be the best wrestling has ever been written ever, with these interweaving connected characters. But here it's like, do we like the length and drawing things out is certainly hurting. Like, I don't think anything big happens on a non-Big Four show. That's probably a problem. So we had a bunch of NXT people. We had 5, I think, which is funny because there's like girls that are on the main roster that aren't in this match. Like Isla Dawn or whatever, and like they're all not in it. To make way for NXT people is probably not not their favorite thing, but anyway, that's what they went with. Chelsea Green was obviously very over in this match too. Accidentally letting Piper eliminate her is good. It continues a storyline, etc. Also, the Ivy Nile spot where Maxine Dupree threw her out was obviously a big prop. That was good. There was a moment here where Bianca's been cold for a year because they've had her do tag stuff, and it's like, this is like a waste of this girl. This is insane. Now, in the end, it probably will pay off because having her out of the title picture, that like, if she'd just been continuously in it, it probably would have gotten a little dull, and maybe people would have turned on her, or she would get like a Charlotte-esque reaction. Obviously, Rhea had to like lose it and get injured and chase, so it's kind of kept her fresh. So I assume in the coming year, Bianca will be champion again, and I think the time off between, because she had a long championship reign. Who'd she even lose to? Io, right? I guess. Wasn't she on Raw then? And maybe I don't remember. But yeah, her also being one of the random girls thrown out in the Nia thing is not good. Also, there was no Jade Cargill thing where she's going to run out and attack Bianca for attacking her or whatever. I expected that to happen, and I was like waiting for it, but it didn't. That's okay. Oh, my point here is when Bianca came out, it felt like, oh, we're like back, because she got like a massive reaction, and it was like, oh, and she looked like a star, and I was like, oh, okay. She like, the potential coldness hasn't hit her this hard. Because I do still think like these big crowds usually aren't watching week to week, so like the names that are recognizable they will recognize, or people that are hot they will recognize. And I think that was probably seen throughout. We'll go and read it what Sasha is saying real quick. That pop was huge. Yeah, she's a star. Sudden saying, I don't know, smile to something. I'm not sure what he was smiling at, what he disagrees with me here. Nikki was unexpected. I haven't been paying attention to like the rumor mill very much at all. But I definitely had heard that Nikki was coming. So that wasn't as surprising to me. I thought for sure Rhea or Becky or even AJ Lee. Why would Rhea be in it, Sergeant? She's like literally the champion. I did think Becky was going to come out, but she didn't. And AJ Lee, there was like a CM Punk thing that seemed to be teasing it. But yeah, she didn't come out again. Trish being there was cool though. Yes, Trish was another surprise towards the end. And I think Trish had the best, like, the ideal, like, legend not shooting an angle appearance that isn't just like a funny come in, get thrown out in the same, like, entrant. Also, a big thing was that it's 2 minutes between entrants this time. Which I think was probably for the best, because if you watch old Rumbles, especially recent Rumbles, a lot of the time they're like rushing to get their spots in before the countdown comes, because once the countdown comes, nobody's watching the ring anymore, and they would like constantly fuck it up. Now there is I remember one elimination that they did fuck up. I think it was in the men's match, where people were getting thrown out while the countdown was happening. I can't remember who it was exactly, but it was somebody. So 2 minutes gives them more time to like do it between. But also, the clock was definitely gimmicked this year because the Roman entrant, I swear, went on for like 3.5 minutes because he did the long walk to the ring. He doesn't even come out at the beginning of his song, right? Because he lets it play for a little bit. And then he's like beating up everybody, like throws two guys out. And then he does like a whole stare down with Jacob Fatu before and I think they fight. Before the next one came in, and I was like, this is like 3.5 minutes. So they're gimmicking it a little bit. But yeah. I wonder how that works. I wonder if they like let it go for a minute. And then as soon as like the director gives the like, oh, it's a good time, we got that spot in, like do the countdown clock. Or maybe it just is on a thingy, and I'm like, the passage of time is hard to decipher or something. It's crazy. There were other NXT girls in it. Lash Legend came in. I've heard that name before, and maybe I've seen her before. I think she's like the Trick Williams girlfriend. What happened to that guy? Is he on the main roster yet? He get hurt or something? She was big, and she was okay. They did the thing where they were all in for a little bit. Jada Parker, who I've heard the name of, but I don't think I'd ever seen either. I think she was in a tag team with Lash Legend. Yeah, it's still a terrible name, but we'll get over it. She was also big. And it's usually good when the girls have bigger bodies because then they make noise when they bump, and that's like the most important thing. A lot of NXT stuff. Then obviously Julia and Stephanie Valencar were in. I don't even know if that's how you say her name properly. Julia got like a no reaction, which is very interesting because Stephanie Valencar did. And I legitimately am curious whether or not it's like just because like there's more horny posting of that Stephanie girl on Twitter, and so more people like recognized her and her name. I wonder if that's literally how it is or just the Julia thing. Because sometimes the pops would come in waves, and I think this did help the Alexa pop a little bit, where it was like the music would start and the people that recognize the music freak out. And then obviously it takes a little bit for like the text to pop up on screen to tell the audience in the arena who it is specifically if they didn't recognize the music. Because it would happen a few times where somebody wouldn't recognize the music and then they would like come out and then the crowd would react. And it was very funny because just they like thought well of the person but didn't recognize the music. So I don't know if like Julia's name didn't pop up or because she came out like a outfit they didn't recognize her, or if she like this crowd legitimately didn't know her, because this crowd was very NXT in focus, especially for a more casual stadium crowd. So that was certainly interesting. They both also, well, Julia, it says, just got thrown out by Roxanne Perez. Valencar was in the silly Nia Jax spot. Then obviously Trish was there, which was cool. And then the Nikki Bella thing at the end. Outside of that, was there too much else to say? There was a weird, apparently Shayna Baszler, Sonya Deville, and Zoe Stark are in like a faction. And they like ganged up on everybody, but then they got ganged up on by the babyfaces and thrown out. Which is kind of a cute spot. I kind of did like that. Because we didn't really need a dominant spot where they threw everybody out. Everybody, hold on. I'm doing a big yawn. Other than that, I did like at the end that they committed to the Nia, because a lot of the time they just have a big person come out like 27 through 30. And usually they don't really actually do much. They just come out, and either they send a second big person out and then they both go out together or something, or one of them gets rid of the other. But they always have the spot where everybody teams up on them and then they power out after getting pummeled on, and it's like the same thing. But then usually like Nia's never like the second last girl in. They just all gang up on her and throw her out, or one person like Charlotte or something throws her out. But to commit to her, and especially since she was recently champion and they are trying to like push her still, her like actually throwing a bunch of people out was a good idea. And her being like the end foe for Charlotte, besides Roxanne Perez for whatever reason. I did like that as a concept. I just didn't like like a bunch of names just getting thrown out, and like they're not really being a payoff for the EO thing, or for Liv and what do you call it? And Raquel and especially Bianca being thrown out just like a random guy in a cluster is not good. There was an interesting thing at the beginning where it looked like Io and Liv were really trying to like do innovative like saves, where they were like holding onto the ropes weird and getting thrown out weird. I can't remember specific examples, but I remember noting that and was like, oh, they're trying to be unique in this match, which is pretty hard. There's been a lot of them, and there's only really so much you can do. But that was the women's rumble, I believe. You got to ban the bot. Find Wizard. I don't want to go on that chat. It's fine. They only send the message once. Yeah, I agree, Sergeant says. Well, I must have been telling smarts if that's the case. Jordan Grace should have won or something. I don't know. There are some interesting things. People on Twitter seem to want Liv Morgan and Alexa Bliss to feud now that like she threw her out and stuff. That would probably be a good idea. Again, the promos would be good. They're similar sizes. It could be like a second match on WrestleMania Day 2 or something. I could see that happening. It would be nice for Alexa Bliss to come back into that. Now, the thing is that Nikki Bella is coming back like full time, right? That's the thing people were saying beforehand. If that's the case, it will be interesting to see what she does. There's obviously limited space on this WrestleMania card. So we'll have to see. I assume they're doing... I assume they're doing Jade and Bianca still. And then what? We've got Charlotte and Tiffany. And then Rhea and somebody. She really doesn't have an opponent. Io, I guess, right? There's literally nobody else. Unless it's like Roxanne Perez or something. Which could be a possibility, I guess. We'll have to see. There's more to shake out in the women's division, I guess. They could shoot angles between now and WrestleMania. It's a long time. Now, I kind of talked about the men's Rumble somewhere in there a lot. I guess the Cody match happened. Sami didn't turn on him. Kevin Owens went for the package pile driver and then took a crazy-looking Alabama slam. Then Cody couldn't get the thing undone and had to climb up and pull the belts off. That was funny. There's also interesting positioning throughout this feud of like Cody being more heelish. And there certainly is an undercurrent, especially when his like thing first started where it goes dun dun or whatever. There were boos initially. I wonder if they're trying to intentionally play into that or what. Because again, I assume they're doing the Cena match, in which he will probably be the heel a little bit. I assume it'll be two baby faces shaking hands and kissing, and there's definitely going to be a hand raise and a passing of the torch at the end. Assuming Cody wins, which I'm almost certain he will. But I think they'll let him do some more heelish things in the lead up or even in the match. Though maybe not. Maybe they just rely on the two babyface thing, but that's not much of an angle. We'll have to see. But the Kevin Owens thing being like the everyman and Cody being like I feel like everybody's been saying this since he like the first second he got there, but the heel turn has to come eventually. And it will be interesting to see how it happens. Like him just standing over him and like posing with the title and stuff seemed a little heelish. I also assume we're doing Kevin and Sami at WrestleMania, and that's probably where this is leading because he'll be mad that he didn't help him, and it'll be good because it'll be them in like their original positions where Sami's the babyface. Because they did have that one match that one time, right? But Sami was the heel, and it was like the first Logan Paul thing they did, right? But the actual like Triple H, NXT, PWG, Crusher, Suplex landing on the head thing is obviously a match they probably want to have a lot. And they'll probably get it. But to book the rest of WrestleMania, we've kind of got to talk about this men's Rumble, huh? Because somehow it looks like they could have the first ever, like, actual fatal four-way feud WrestleMania main event, which would be hilarious, between Roman, Drew, Seth, and Punk. The thing is, Drew wasn't really part of the angle, but he's mad at all three of them, so he could, like, fit in. But that's very interesting, because they very much try to get Seth into things here. Because obviously there's, like, the tease with the Punk and Roman thing, and I think we had assumed that they were doing the Punk and Roman thing, even over the Jacob Fatu, like, possibility. But now I guess it's a three-way. I don't see how else. Well, I don't see why else you would shoot the angle this way, with Seth just beating him up. There is a. This is kind of a thing because they try to tell this story about how Seth like gets to Roman and ultimately him letting Seth get to him is like his downfall. Like they did that with the WrestleMania match with the poorly shot spear. And then they try to do it this time. Like he let Seth get into his head and distract him. That's why Punk got to throw him out at the end. And they try to tie it into like, oh, he hasn't forgotten the villain origin story is actually when you stabbed him in the back, Seth. But they like reunited and got back together like 3 times after that, and he seemed to have forgiven him. So it doesn't really make sense if you actually think about it. Now, it's obviously better than what we usually get in wrestling, so I guess we'll all take it. But there is like holes in it. I guess I skipped to the end again. We'll build up to that. We started with Rey and Penta. Racist! We've got all the Mexican guys at the beginning, including Santos Escobar and fucking Andrade, who eventually come out and they all do like the lucha stuff, and it's like, oh, passing the torch or something. It is very funny that they're like, Penta might be the second greatest luchador of all time after Rey Mysterio thing, which I'm assuming makes every Lucha Libre fan very, very angry. That they would say things like that, but whatever. It is funny that we have sort of had these Rey Mysterio like attempted replacements to be like the big thing for the Mexican market, like even back in the day, like ADR. And then I was like, well, ADR is kind of a slimy heel. This doesn't really make sense, and this doesn't really fit. And obviously, ADR was a very big star. In terms of like achievements and stuff, he's like way more successful than Rey Mysterio, right? He was world champion way more times. He was on top more seriously. Like he was like the top babyface and the top heel of SmackDown for a little bit. Now, obviously, these are in SmackDown's very dying days at the end of the first brand split, but and then we tried to do it with Santos, and then we tried to do it with Andrade, and there might have even been somebody else in there. Obviously, the Sin Cara thing was a thing way back then, too. But it's funny how Penta, like, immediately lapped them all by just being cool, whereas Santos is obviously very, like, boring, and Andrade kind of is, too. It's like, oh, Penta's got a mask, and he's got, like, a cool aesthetic and shit like that, so he's already more over than those guys ever have been. It's very funny. Also, Andrade was in for, like, 3 minutes, and they threw him out. When I saw him, I forgot that he had already returned, like, a whole year, and I was like, a year ago, and it's like, man, he really didn't do anything all year. It looks like he's in a worse position. Like, what's going on here? That's kind of funny. But anyway, Carmelo Hayes also comes in and kind of gets dumped out, which is cool. They definitely went out of their way to give Chad Gable, like, a spot. He eventually gets thrown out by Bron Breakker. I will say, like, the first 10 or so entries for this one, I was like, oh, this isn't, like, as engaging as the women's one, I don't think. And also, this one was very star-studded, so it's kind of like a thing where it's like, how do you, like, structure it? What happens here? Maybe they could have gone with a better structure. Maybe if, like, Roman, Seth, and CM Punk and all that stuff was, like, in, like, the first half, and then we had that fight angle, that could have been interesting. Then obviously you don't get a lot of the Cena moments, and Cena's kind of at the end by himself as like the big star. I guess you could have put Drew in there, but then you don't get any of the Drew moments with any of those guys. I don't know. There probably wasn't a better way to do it, I guess. But you get the iShow speed thing, which was like pretty good. The speed was pretty funny. I did see like he tweeted about it like twice, and one of them had like 500k likes, and one of them had like 300k likes, which is obviously what you want. Also, Bron Breakker was out at the beginning here. There was an Otis spot. Jimmy Uso came out. It was very funny because everybody thought it was Jay for a second. Also, Jacob Fatu was in early. I kind of like the, because I didn't actually see the Strowman angle, but they just kind of had Strowman get beat up. Also, Braun Strowman is another guy that's done absolutely nothing since he's come back, huh? And they probably never will do anything with again. Like his identity as like a big monster is like dead, unless they could repackage him or have him turn heel or something. What was I just saying? I don't know. Jacob Fatu comes in, but we can't really afford the spot where he throws absolutely everybody out, so he's just kind of there. There are also funny things where everybody did get thrown out, but Penta would just be lying in the corner a little bit, and it's like, I guess this is maybe a messy structure, but then I was like, oh, well, it's pretty obvious Penta's like going to go the whole way. But then he did eventually just get thrown out by Finn, I think. Um, Finn Balor's another guy that comes out and you're like, oh my god. At different times, you're like on top of the world. He was a guy that got absolutely no reaction because nobody recognized his music. And then as he came out, everybody's like, oh, Finn Balor, we're supposed to care about that guy. Let's react a little bit. It was very funny. Obviously, then Roman comes out. There's also the Joe Hendry thing. I don't know. I'm not really in on this Joe Hendry meme. It's okay. There's a song. I understand. They only played like the part of the song that people know, like the one time at the beginning, and I was like, oh. When people were fired up and a bunch of people were pretending to know what it was, it probably would have been better to play it and have this sing along then. CM Punk got a good sing along when he came out. Huh? That was pretty cool. Also, Ludwig Kaiser got thrown out very quickly, which is funny. You always have one of those. Well, not always, but you should. You should? I don't know. It's funny when you do. Then Jey Uso comes out and obviously gets a big pop. It is funny because it is like the Jey Uso moment. I guess we're skipping to talking about it, which was obviously good. I remember messaging my cousin while I was watching it because he had watched it live. And we got down to like the final four. I was like, oh, Punk's still winning because I was on the Punk is going to win and then challenge. I don't know. Maybe Cody. Maybe that's the match they were doing. Or at least he's going to be there at the end. Because I Cena had said the Elimination Chamber thing, so I was like, oh, he's definitely in the chamber, so he can't win. But then obviously when it gets down to Logan Paul, Jey Uso, and John Cena, you're like, well, we're doing the same thing again, where it's like, oh, Cena has to win, like Charlotte had to win, but they got you because Jey actually won. I think the way it happened, the pop was pretty big. It wasn't as big as it would have been if, like it's not the Jey Uso winning the belt from Roman that one SummerSlam pop. Like, that would have been. And I don't think him beating Gunther, which is almost certainly what's going to happen, is going to be that either. There is a cool way they could do this, where he beats Gunther, and then, like, the next night on Raw, or, like, the next week, or not the next week, but the next pay-per-view, like, Roman beats him. And then you have to build up to him beating Roman that way, and it's a more amicable feud rather than a, like, blood one. I don't know. I guess the Jey Uso pinning Roman thing is, like, the Money in the Bank moment. That's, like, the payoff. It's almost like, because my cousin was like, oh, Sammy's going to win, which is obviously a little funny. But even then, I was like, man, if Sammy won now, it would be, like, a consolation prize. It would be like, oh, remember when you were really hot and we didn't, and, like, the context around the situation didn't allow us to give you your moment? Well, why don't we do it a few years later when you're kind of still hot, but kind of not, and then you'll win the belt. It does feel like Sammy's IC title win last year when he gets to end Gunther's, like, streak thing. It's like, do any of us really remember? Was that, like, a big Sami Zayn moment? Like, him beating the Usos is definitely a bigger moment. And, like, obviously the Rumble moment where he hits Roman with the chair is, like, the big moment. It almost feels like that a little bit with Jey. Now, Jey is kind of hot again recently, especially when he's coming out with, like, the rappers and doing the thing. It does make him seem cool. I guess it is still in the shadow of the Roman Reigns stuff. Where obviously there was, like, 3 contenders to who's going to end this Roman thing. It was Jey, it was Sami, and then it was Cody, and they did go with Cody. And obviously it did make Cody, like, the big megastar. But now it's like, I don't know. Obviously, you if you're in Jey Uso's position, you're just like, yeah, I still want to do it, even if when. But is he? Like, part of me is like, well, the song is more open than it's ever been. I guess the moment should have been more. Like, in my head, I was like, well, Jey can't win, because if Jey was going to win, obviously he would throw Roman out at the end. But obviously they wanted to shoot that other angle, so that kind of got them out of doing that. I don't know. There is, like, I like the idea. It's not too late at all, but it is a little later than it could have been. And so that leaves a little bit. It doesn't really leave a sour taste, because obviously it was so. I did not expect it. When Cena fell off the apron, I literally said, oh, out loud. It was crazy. But there is, like, a bit of hesitation here, I guess. Braun is going to retire soon? Maybe. Isn't he, like, 30-something? But I guess, I don't know. Obviously, the best part of this match was when you do the Cena the Roman Cena into the CM Punk entrance stare down, where it's literally just guys coming to the ring, and that's enough to sustain the whole intermediate period. Um, and obviously that did feel like three very big stars coming out and all being in the ring together. And then Seth came out, and it was like, because they're doing the thing and they don't touch, and I'm like, oh, it has to be like The Rock, right? Because we're like one-upping it every time. Like Cena comes out, and then obviously Punk's way cooler than shitty John Cena, but The Rock's even cooler than CM Punk. This is crazy. But then it was like Seth Rollins, and it's like, you don't really belong here, little bro. It's like Seth Rollins is like, I nearly said like Shawn Michaels tier is like an insult. Seth Rollins is like Bret Hart tier as an insult. Seth Rollins is like an A+ player when there's a whole S tier. He's like there. He's on like Drew McIntyre level. He's on like Sami Zayn at his hottest level, but like he's sustained it over years. There is just another level that like you just have to have a bigger personality than Seth Rollins. And like Roman somehow got there through having like no personality, but it is literally like an aura thing or something. Obviously, John Cena has a sustained like 10-year absolute dominance period that has ingrained himself in this. Even if I will die on this hill of like John Cena is really bad. Like his goofy facial expressions throughout this whole thing, when the cool moment is happening and he's like shaking his fist or whatever, you're like, this is the biggest fucking dork on the planet, and I hate him. And I remember why this was the worst period of my life when John Cena was just beating everybody, and I was 12 and I was hating it. And obviously CM Punk is like one of the most personalities of all time. Now there is like an S+ tier, and I think somebody like Cody is now in like that S tier, where Seth isn't, and will almost certainly never be. He's in like the John Moxley tier, like A tier. There is like an S+ tier, which is like Hogan, Rock, Flair, and Austin. That's probably it. But yeah, it's just kind of like a funny moment where Seth comes out. And because by the end, Seth is kind of the most interesting element in this angle. So they do kind of get you there. But that's because it is like an interesting character thing. But Drew also has a lot of that. And Drew isn't on this level really either. There is like a personality problem with Seth, right? Where it's just kind of, he's just kind of a dude. Like even Jey Uso has like more of that going on than Seth Rollins does. Seth doesn't really feel like a distinctive personality. He just kind of feels like a guy. And this is kind of famously like a critique Stone Cold had of him in like 2015 when he was like reviewing SummerSlam 2015 or something. He's like, I don't know who Seth Rollins is. Like he's got all the tools, but he just can't put the final piece together. And then one time when Seth Rollins was the Drip God, yes, the worst character of all time, the worst name of all time. Well, it was not quite as bad as the Monday Night Messiah, I guess. And Austin had him on his podcast, and it was like a full circle moment where he's like, and now, young man, you do have the personality or whatever. I do know who Seth Rollins is. You do have an identity. I disagree. I still don't think he really does. Like, what's Seth freaking Rollins? Is that his identity? Like, he's good at wrestling, and he's vaguely charismatic, and he can, like, do a promo. And it's like, it's like Bret Hart. But even Bret Hart has the silhouette and the pink and stuff. Like, Seth Rollins doesn't really have a signature outfit. He does have a finisher. Like, if we're ranking all time here, like, Mick Foley is somebody that's ahead of, like, Seth Rollins, definitely. Like, in, like, 15 years, when Seth Rollins is retired, is he really going to come out? I don't know. Maybe he's in, like, a Kurt Angle tier. But Kurt Angle's just, like, a much better wrestler and probably does have better personality. Like, maybe he's in that tier, but he's at the bottom of the tier and Kurt's at, like, the top of the tier. I would probably put, like, Brock Lesnar in that tier, too. Like, I feel like there's not really an identifiable thing if he was to come out in, like, 15 years, whereas, like, John Cena will always have his shit, and Roman will do the point, and CM Punk will just always look like CM Punk, and you'll be like, that guy has opinions on everything. Anyway, Sergeant is laughing. Is he agreeing with my shitting on Seth Rollins? The point is, Seth Rollins was the most interesting part of this because he like beat up Roman a bunch. And I guess they're gonna have a 3-way, and like that's obviously the most interesting thing. And it's like, well, does main event Jey Uso not even get the main event of the night he's like on? Like, assumingly he would be like the main event of night one, because realistically, there's like Cody, Cena, Punk, Roman, and Rhea. Those are like the 5 biggest stars, right? And so they should be in the main events, but Rhea doesn't have an opponent, so she's not going to be in the main. Unless they do the Charlotte thing, then it could be the main event, but even then, Charlotte isn't really in this category, I don't think. And I don't think Gunther is anywhere near this category. So it's like Jay and Gunther going to go on second last, and then Roman, Seth, and Punk would go on last. Because you probably don't want Roman, Seth, and Punk going on before that. They could also be like the 4th match on the card or something like that. I don't know. That would almost certainly be the most interesting match, because with Cena and Cody, it's like whatever. It's like nostalgia crying for the Cena fans. But I don't know. Anyway, he also beat up Punk, Drew too. He did. That's why I'm like, oh, we could do a 4-way, because I like Drew a lot. He should be in it. It would be cool. Though it seems like they're setting up him and Priest a little bit. Also, apparently there's like backstage drama, and Drew like left because he was mad that somebody in the match was like going into business for themselves, and like a bunch of people were mad at this one guy. And if you kind of look at it, you can figure out that it's probably LA Knight. Now, obviously, I don't have any evidence to back that up, and I assume it's not Logan Paul, because Logan Paul didn't really do anything in this match. Though neither really did LA Knight. Anyway, there is a period towards the end where after those guys, like Sami Zayn comes out and Damian Priest comes out and LA Knight comes out and Logan Paul comes out, and it's like, these guys are like stars. But like after what we just got, they kind of feel... And obviously they had Dom come out afterwards, which was cute and clever. And they let Priest throw him out, which was okay. He didn't really have too much of a spot. Which you'd think he might after like the recent period he's had, but I also don't know where we're going with Dom too much into the future. They probably should have had Rhea not win the belt and had Rhea versus Dom at Mania. And then had Liv versus Io or something. That would probably be better. Because what is Dom going to be making fun of Alexa Bliss now? Like, what's happening here? Anyway. Other than that, John Cena's dumb faces were terrible. Him, like, his selling is terrible. When he's, like, holding onto the rope and he's doing the most obvious, like, oh, hey, guys, I might fall off here. But the crowd still reacted, so whatever. That's kind of the thing that always happens with John Cena. Like, he's doing the goofiest, most corniest, you cannot take this seriously thing ever. But the crowd's really into it, and they are taking it seriously, so what's a boy to do? Roman without the belt is an interesting thing, especially when he doesn't have, like, a set plan. It's, like, very dynamic and interesting. I don't know. Mania is... There are interesting places to go, I guess. And we'll see when we get there. Like, having that triple threat seems impossible. But, like, why would you, so heavily shoehorn Seth into this program? Like, there has to be a payoff, which has to be a 3-way, right? Maybe somehow they get the World Heavyweight Championship into this feud. I assume we're probably going to have the Cody Chamber match, and it'll probably be Cena. I don't know if you want to even put Roman and Punk in there, because then they have to get pinned. Cena, Punk, Roman, Seth, Drew, and like Sami Zayn or something. That's like a crazy lineup. Or even like a Logan Paul or something. Oh, and when Logan Paul initially threw out CM Punk, I was like, oh no. We're doing the CM Punk Logan Paul match? This is crazy. But no, it was just literally like a heat thing. And also I saw him making fun of Kevin Owens for losing to him on SmackDown I think like yesterday. So it's like a little callback to that. Also, AJ Styles came back and got a big pop. Wasn't that cute? Also thrown out by Logan Paul. Other than that, I think I've talked about everything. I have no idea what, like, Jacob Fatu does at WrestleMania. Like, if you had told me, like, days out, I would have been like, oh, it's probably going to be, like, Roman and Solo and Hell in a Cell or something. But, like, I think they've blown off the Solo feud. So but what the fuck does Solo Sikoa do now? He, like, literally lost. Jacob Fatu is clearly the star. Like, does he win a mid-card belt or something? I don't know. We'll have to see. I have no clue for most of the stuff too. Yeah, it is definitely interesting where we don't know exactly, and that is exciting. Like, who is the Logan Paul match? This is crazy. Who's a relatively big baby face? Seth's already done it. They could do AJ, I guess. Maybe they do him and Drew McIntyre or something. That'd be funny. My throat's starting to hurt. Why is that? Anyway, I think that's it for our Royal Rumble discussion. So if you're watching this over on YouTube, this is where we'll leave you. Maybe I'll do WrestleMania streams and reviews or something. Maybe the Chamber. I probably will watch that because it seems like it'll have some consequence. So who knows when we'll be back. But we just love wrestling. We love wrestling. Loving wrestling. That's what we do here. And if you want to see us continue to love and wrestling, you got to subscribe. Get it? Support links in the description below. Thanks.